In the cold market of a distant alien city, glowing lights flickered above broken stalls, and a small alien girl stood alone, holding a box of old toys and shaking hands. Her eyes were wide and tired, and her clothes were thin for the freezing air, but she still whispered soft words to every passerby who walked past her. Most aliens ignored her small voice and her broken toys, because in this city, only power and money were seen as real. The toys were not worth much. Some were cracked, some had no color left, but to the girl they were memories of better days. She did not sell them for fun or food. She sold them for one reason only: to save her dying mother. Not far from the market, deep inside a silent hospital tower, her mother lay inside a clear life pod with weak light moving around her chest. The doctors had already said the truth in cold voices. The medicine was rare and very costly, and time was moving fast. The girl had cried before, but now her tears were gone, and only hope pushed her small feet forward through the hard streets. She lifted one toy and spoke softly again. "Take this, please. I need money for my mother." A few aliens stopped for a moment, looked at the toy, and walked away with no feeling in their eyes. Each time that happened, the girl held her breath and felt her heart sink deeper inside her chest. From the shadow of a tall, broken wall, a human watched everything in silence, his face calm, but his eyes sharp and focused. Humans were rare in this sector, and most aliens believed humans were weak and useless in the wider galaxy. This human said nothing as he observed the girl and the cold world around her, but something in his eyes slowly changed. The girl finally fell to her knees when no one stopped for a long time, her small hand still holding the last toy close to her chest. She looked up at the dark sky and whispered a quiet prayer for her mother, even though she was not sure anyone was listening. The human took one slow step forward, then stopped when a group of rough alien traders passed between them. Their laughter was loud and cruel, and they pushed the girl's box of toys aside as if it meant nothing at all. The toys spilled onto the cold street, and the girl scrambled to gather them with shaking hands and silent pain on her face. The human clenched his fist in the shadow, feeling a memory from his own past rise inside his heart. He did not move yet, but the choice was already forming inside his mind as he watched the girl fight to stand again. And in that frozen market, under alien lights, a small act of kindness was about to begin, one that would change far more than either of them could ever imagine. The human waited until the noise of the market grew loud again. Then he slowly walked toward the small alien girl, his steps quiet but strong. The girl did not notice him at first, as she was busy picking her broken toys from the cold ground with shaking hands. When she finally looked up, fear flashed in her wide eyes, because humans were rare and unknown in that part of the galaxy. The human softly raised one hand to show he meant no harm, and his calm voice broke through the cold air. "Why are you selling these toys alone at night?" The girl hesitated, her fingers tightening around the last toy, but something in his voice made her speak. She told him about her mother inside the life pod, about the rare medicine, and about the price she could never reach alone. Her voice did not shake with fear anymore, but with tired sadness, as if hope was slowly slipping away from her small heart. The human listened without speaking, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, the silence between them felt heavy and deep. Slowly, the human reached into his pocket and placed a small credit crystal into her hand. The girl stared at it in shock, because it was more money than she had seen in her whole life. But when she checked the value on the toy scanner, her face fell again, because it was still not enough for the medicine. Tears gathered in her eyes, but did not fall, as if she had no strength left to cry. The human watched her struggle and felt something twist inside his chest, something old and painful. Without another word, the girl thanked him with a small bow and ran toward the hospital tower as fast as her legs could carry her. The human followed from a distance, moving through shadows and side streets like a ghost. Inside the hospital, cold lights reflected off metal walls as the girl ran to the medical desk and showed the credit crystal with shaking hands. The doctor scanned it once and then shook his head slowly, still not enough, The rare supply just arrived, and the price has doubled. The girl felt the world spin around her as hope slipped through her fingers once again. Behind the glass wall of the life pod, her mother's breathing grew weak and uneven. The human watched everything from the dark corner of the hall, his jaw tight and his eyes burning with silent fire. He turned away from the hospital and walked into the deeper parts of the city where the clean lights faded and danger ruled the streets. Whispers followed him as he moved through narrow paths where law had no power and fear walked freely. At the edge of the black market district, neon signs flickered like warning signals in the dark. The human stopped and looked at the hidden gate guarded by armed alien figures with cold eyes. Inside that gate was the medicine, and inside that gate was death for those who entered without power or price. The human took one slow breath and stepped forward anyway. Behind him, the fate of a small alien girl and her dying mother waited in silence. The black market district was darker than the rest of the city, and the air itself felt heavy with danger. The human moved through narrow paths where broken lights flickered and hidden eyes watched every step. Alien voices whispered from behind metal doors, and shadows moved where no one should stand. At the end of the street, two armed alien guards stood before a thick steel gate marked with red warning signs. The human stopped a few steps away, his face calm, but his heart steady and ready. One guard lifted a weapon and shouted for him to turn back. The human did not answer with words. Instead, he took another step forward. The guards exchanged a fast look and opened fire without mercy. In one sudden motion, the human moved faster than their eyes could follow. A sharp sound echoed through the dark street, and both guards fell to the ground before they could fire again. The hidden cameras watched, and deep in the market tunnels, powerful figures began to pay attention. Inside the black market hall, rare weapons, stolen tech, and forbidden medicine glowed under neon lights. Danger ruled this place, and mercy had no value here. The human walked forward as if he owned the path, his presence silent but heavy. Alien traders pulled back as he passed, feeling something wrong in the air around him. At the far end, a thick glass case held the rare medicine glowing with soft blue light. A tall alien boss stepped forward, his body covered in metal armor and glowing marks of rank. "You think you can walk in here and take what you want?" the boss said with a cruel laugh. The human raised his eyes slowly and spoke in a calm, flat voice. "I am here to buy medicine for a dying mother." The boss laughed louder and tapped the glass case. "This is worth more than your life." The human stepped closer, his voice still steady. "Name your price." The boss signaled his men, and more armed aliens appeared from every side. "Money cannot buy this tonight," the boss said with a dark smile, "but your blood might make good payment." The human closed his eyes for one slow breath, and when he opened them, something inside him changed. In one sudden burst of motion, the floor cracked and the nearest guards were thrown back like broken dolls. The black market exploded into chaos. Lights shattered, weapons fired, and screams filled the air. The human moved like a living storm, every strike clean, fast, and precise. One by one, the gang fell, unable to match his speed or strength. The alien boss stepped back in fear as the human walked through smoke and broken metal toward him. "What are you?" the boss whispered in shock. The human stopped just inches from his face and answered, "I am human." With one final move, the boss was slammed into the wall and fell silent to the floor. The hall grew quiet as survivors dropped their weapons and fled into the shadows. The human walked to the glass case and took the glowing medicine vial in his hand. Far away in the silent hospital, a small alien girl sat beside her dying mother, not knowing that a storm had just passed through the darkest part of the city for her sake. And above the broken black market, the galaxy had just witnessed the first real sign that humans were never weak at all. The human moved fast through the dark streets with the glowing medicine secured in his hand, his body wounded, but his steps strong and steady. Behind him, the black market burned in silence as broken lights flickered and empty shadows watched him disappear. He did not look back even once, because every second now meant life or death for a small alien mother far away. The hospital tower rose ahead like a cold silver blade cutting into the night sky. Inside, the small alien girl sat beside the life pod, holding her mother's weak hand, whispering soft words that her mother could barely hear. Her eyes were red from waiting and praying, and fear wrapped around her heart like cold chains. When a human entered the hospital doors, warning lights suddenly flashed across the halls. The black market attack was already known, and the alien mafia had traced the medicine to this place. Guards locked down the hospital floors, and patients cried out as fear spread through the metal halls. The human moved through the chaos like a shadow, hiding the glowing vial beneath his coat. From the far end of the hall, dark figures appeared with wide weapons and cold, killing eyes. The mafia had arrived, silent and deadly. The girl felt something wrong and stood up near the life pod, her small hands shaking as she looked toward the door. At that moment, the human stepped into the room, the blue glow of the medicine lighting his wounded face. Her eyes widened in shock and hope as she ran toward him without fear. He knelt beside the life pod and placed the medicine into the medical port with careful hands. For one long breath, nothing happened, and silence swallowed the room. Then the pod light changed from weak red to soft green, and the mother's breathing grew slow and steady once again. The girl covered her mouth as tears of joy finally fell from her eyes. But the happiness lasted only a heartbeat. Explosions echoed through the hospital walls as metal doors were torn open by force. The mafia stormed the floors with weapons ready and fury in their eyes. The human stood up slowly and turned to face them, placing himself between the girl and the door. His body was tired and wounded, but his eyes burned with fire and choice. "You take one step closer and you fall," he said in a calm, deadly voice. The mafia leader laughed and raised his weapon, thinking the human was already finished. The first shot fired, and the glass walls shattered into the air like rain. The human moved again, faster than fear, faster than death. But this time, the numbers were against him, and the wounds began to slow his steps. The girl cried out his name, though she barely knew it. He was struck and thrown across the room, sliding near the life pod in a trail of blood. The mafia moved in for the final strike, believing the story was over. Then the human pushed himself up once more with shaking strength, standing between the enemy and the mother and child once again. And in that broken hospital room, with lights flashing and death closing in, the human made a choice that would shake the galaxy far beyond this single night. The human stood again with blood on his coat and pain in his body, but his eyes were still steady and unbroken. The mafia fighters paused for a moment in shock because no one was supposed to rise after such wounds. The girl cried behind him, holding her mother's weak hand inside the glowing life pod. The mafia leader stepped forward with anger in his eyes and aimed his weapon at the human's head. "You should have stayed down," the leader said with cold hate. The human breathed slow and deep, and then he spoke one calm sentence that no one expected. "I did not survive 3 Star Wars to die in a hospital room." In that moment, fear passed through the mafia fighters for the first time. The human moved again, but this time not like a fighter, this time like a legend waking from sleep. He disarmed one attacker, used the weapon on another, and pushed forward with broken but unstoppable force. Every move he made was clean and deadly, as if his body remembered a life of battle long buried. The hospital room shook with noise and flashing alarms, but slowly one by one the mafia fighters fell to the floor. The leader tried to run, his courage breaking at last. The human threw his weapon, and it struck the leader down before he could reach the door. Silence slowly returned to the broken room, broken only by the soft sound of the mother's breathing inside the life pod. Security forces rushed in at last, surrounding the human with weapons raised but unsure what they were seeing. The girl ran forward and held the human's hand without fear, even as blood fell from his fingers. "Do not hurt him," she cried. "He saved my mother." The officers hesitated, confusion moving through their ranks. Medical drones arrived and lifted the wounded human onto a floating bed. As they worked, one officer scanned his bio record and froze in shock. His voice lowered as he read the name and rank aloud. Former human war captain, survivor of the outer extinction battles. The word spread through the hospital in whispers like fire through dry air. A human war captain was not a normal soldier. He was a living weapon of history. Outside the hospital, news screens began to light up across the city. They showed the ruined black market, the fallen mafia leader, and the wounded human being carried through the hospital halls. Aliens stopped in the streets to watch in silent disbelief. The story spread faster than fear. A human fought the mafia for one small alien child. Inside the hospital room, the girl sat beside her now stable mother, holding her hand and feeling hope for the first time. She looked at the door where the human had been taken away, her heart heavy with worry and wonder. Far above the city, in secret towers of power, the Galactic Council began to speak the word human with new fear and new respect. And in that single night, one act of kindness had turned into a legend that the galaxy could no longer ignore. The human woke inside a white medical chamber with soft lights above his face and quiet machines beside his body. Pain moved through him like fire, but he stayed silent and opened his eyes with calm control. Outside the glass wall, armed guards stood in straight lines, their weapons ready and their faces hard. News of the hospital battle had spread across the city and into the stars. Screens in every street showed the same message. A human war captain stopped the alien mafia to save one dying mother. Some aliens watched with fear, some with doubt, and some with new respect. Inside the hospital, the small alien girl sat beside her mother, who now breathed freely without machines helping her lungs. The girl held her mother's hand and whispered softly that the human was still alive. The mother opened her weak eyes and smiled for the first time in many dark days. Not far away, a high metal ship landed on the hospital roof with heavy force. The symbol of the Galactic Council shined on its side like cold judgment. 3 tall council officers entered the building with long dark robes and eyes that showed no emotion. They moved through the halls as if they owned the air itself. When they reached the human's chamber, the guard stood aside without question. "You are under galactic arrest for illegal combat and destruction of protected trade zones," the lead officer said in a flat voice. The human did not resist. He only slowly stood despite his wounds and met their eyes without fear. On the streets outside, crowds began to grow as people learned what the council had done. Some shouted that the human was a hero. Others feared what would happen if the council showed weakness. The girl felt panic rise in her chest when she saw soldiers take the human away in restraints. She ran after them through the halls with tears falling from her eyes. "He saved my mother. Please do not take him," she cried with her small broken voice. The officers did not stop, and the doors of the council ship closed behind them with cold final sound. High above the planet, inside the council space station, the human was placed before a long, glowing table of alien judges. Their eyes studied him as if he were a weapon and not a person. One voice spoke from the shadows. "You broke galactic law and challenged power that keeps order in the stars." The human answered slowly, "If your order lets a mother die while a child begs with broken toys, then your order is already broken." The council chamber filled with quiet tension after those words. Back on the planet, the alien girl stood before gathered people and media screens, shaking but brave. She told the story of the market, the toys, the medicine, and the human who never walked away. Her simple words reached hearts faster than any speech of power or law. Protests began across the city, then across nearby systems. The message was clear: the human must live, and the law must change. Inside the council station, pressure from the galaxy began to strike like heavy waves against old stone. And as the council prepared to give its final judgment, no one could say if the human would walk free or fall as a warning to all. Inside the high council chamber, Silence fell like heavy stone as the judges looked down at the wounded human standing alone before them. Screens across the galaxy showed the same room, the same moment, and millions of eyes watched without breathing. The lead council officer rose slowly and spoke with cold authority. The law is clear, and your crime is proven. The human lifted his head and answered with calm strength. I will accept any end, but the child and her mother must live free. On a distant world far below, the small alien girl stood before a sea of people holding one of her broken toys in her hands. Her voice was small but strong as it echoed across screens. He never asked who we were. He only saw that my mother was dying. The crowd grew quiet as her words pressed into their hearts. Inside the council chamber, data streams began to flood the air, showing protests, blocked space routes, and rising anger across many systems. The council officers exchanged uneasy looks as the pressure of the galaxy pushed against their ancient power. For the first time in many cycles, the council understood that fear was no longer enough to rule. Slowly, the lead officer raised one hand and the chamber lights dimmed. The council has reached its final decision, his voice said in a lower tone. The human is released and cleared of all charges. Across the stars, a wave of sound and light burst as whole worlds reacted in shock and joy. The human closed his eyes for one slow breath, as if releasing years of weight from his chest. The council officer spoke again with clear warning in his voice. A new law will be written this day. No child will beg for life while medicine is locked behind profit. On the alien planet, the girl fell to her knees in tears as the crowd lifted her into the air with cries of hope. Back in the hospital room, the mother opened her eyes fully and felt strength returning to her body for the first time in many cycles. She held her daughter close and whispered that the storm had finally passed. Days later, under a quiet rising sun, the human stood at the edge of the city where stars touched the sky. The girl ran toward him holding a small box wrapped in simple cloth. Inside were the broken toys she had tried to sell for her mother. She placed them in his hands and said they were his now because he had bought them with his life. The human lowered himself and gently returned the box to her chest. Keep them, he said softly. They belong to your future. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded with a smile stronger than any fear she had known. A transport ship waited behind the human with engines soft and ready. He turned once more toward the city that had changed his fate and said nothing. As the ship lifted into the sky, the girl raised her small hand and watched until the stars took him away. Across the galaxy, the story spread into legend. A human who chose mercy over power and changed the law with one act of kindness. And from that day forward, whenever a child looked up at the stars, they remembered that humans were never the weakest beings in the galaxy. They were the ones who would break the darkness when no one else would move.